Well, we're in Isaiah, chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. We're going to get through all of them. And if you've already read this, I'm sure most of you have, if not all of you, that there is a little repetition in it. So as we go through it, and then it snowballs and gets a little faster. At the end, I want to go over those questions. If you kind of pause, peuse, as George Bush said, from looking at those for a little bit, because I'm going to do an experiment with you. So we'll see how that turns out too. In 1984, two brothers, Phil and Steve Mayer. Did anybody know who they were? They were Olympian downhill slalom skiers. They grew up around Yakima, Washington. I knew them pretty well. I didn't know them as friends, but I knew them real well because we kind of went to school together. But in 1984, they were Olympian champions. First and second place, the brothers were. So it was a pretty amazing feat, and they came through the region where I grew up, and skied a lot on Snoqualmie Pass and stuff. I love those names in Washington State. Yakima, Issaquah, Snoqualmie, Snohomish, all those Indian names. It's just so cool. Seattle, Chief Seattle. They were on top of the starting block. I don't know what it is in skiing terms, getting ready to do their downhill slalom. And Phil and Steve Mayer were up there, and they were going like this. This is back in 1984. I can't remember who the announcer was, but they were sitting there going like this. And the announcer later asked, he says, "What are you doing?" Now they have had practice runs down this hill, as you can imagine. And so what they were doing is they were visualizing themselves going down there. They were completing the race before they ever started it. Now, this is not a prophecy. You know, it's not an oracle them doing it. It's almost muscle memory. How many men or women have ever played golf? Has anyone played in the last 2 weeks? Okay. On your course, was the last hole a par 4 or a par 5? What was it? Par 5. Okay. Do you remember standing at the tee box and hitting your drive? Can you see where that drive went? What club did you use on your second shot?
5-wood.
5-wood. Can you visualize where that went?
Unfortunately.
I would probably say you could probably tell me all those 5 shots. If you said it took 8 or 9, you won't talk about it. But what I'm sitting there saying is that I haven't played golf in probably 5 years. I had both my shoulders operated on, and it's difficult for me to make the full swing. But I can tell you the last time I played 18 holes, shot an 82, I can tell you every stroke and where every ball went. Wow. I'm not a bright man, Forrest Gump would say, but I'm just sitting there saying there's something about muscle memory and that visualization. And I want you to think for a moment, if you could shut your eyes just for a second, and think about, just keep them shut for a minute, think about exactly where you were sitting in church today. Then church was over, you got up, now you may have shook hands with somebody, have a short conversation, you started walking. Can you see what direction you were going? Can you see where you came out of the doors, walked down the hallway? Can you see all this? Well, you know, we have the ability to visualize things in our lives that we experience. Isaiah had this visual representation of a future that he never had muscle memory for, had no experience. It was divinely given to him by God. It's an amazing concept that's difficult to understand. We can understand it kind of in the way that I represented it in a muscle memory fashion. The age of grace. Christ sacrificed for us the age of grace. We received it. There'll be a time for tribulations. Then there'll be the second coming. This is the area, the millennium, is what Isaiah is talking about. Isaiah is over here. talking about this. And then, after the millennium, we have eternity. This is where God's power reigns, where he's over all countries, he's got the rules, laws, the world, he's running the show. He's able to see all of this over here. And it takes this long, however long that is, I don't want to get into that conversation, for us to get to this point that he saw. And we're not in good shape right now. Right now, we're not in good shape. We're in here somewhere, and we're not in very good shape. We weren't in very good shape then either. But he saw our own salvation and how things were going to roll out. It's pretty amazing the in-depth of his vision that he received from God. There we go. That just kind of lets you know that a lot of these are not my words. I kind of snitched them from other people. All right, this is verses 1 through 3, and I'll kind of allow you to read that personally to yourselves as I kind of dictate my understanding of them. In 2:1, we have Isaiah, who begins to introduce himself as the son of Amos and reveals his vision. The prophet describes God's revelation about the future to him in visual terms. It's quoted. So he's actually seeing this. Much like, to me, I can almost visualize the golf course, the shot. I can almost see it. Not as clearly as I'm looking at you, but nearly. In Isaiah 2:2, he describes what he has in store for Israel's future, showing that God intended for both prophets and to emphasize the glory to come in Israel's distant future. Now, Micah 4:1 through 3 parallels these pretty well. And I wanted to share something with you before we get to that. But there was a discussion in the Broadman and some other resources that I looked at that Isaiah's prophecy of universal peace is repeated in a slightly longer form in Micah 4:1 through 4. It is also referred to in an inverted fashion in Joel 3:10. These factors all serve to complicate the question of authorship. Are these words to be attributed to Isaiah or Micah? Or are they to be attributed to neither, but rather regarded as an anonymous prophecy, a type of floating oracle that was introduced into both Isaiah and Micah, either by prophets themselves or later editors? Each of these alternatives has had its advocates. The position taken here in the reading and the Broadman commentary is that Isaiah was the originator of the oracle and that Micah borrowed it from him. Deeper study and biblical evidence can show this with time allowed. We won't be able to get into it, but as I was going through it, I kind of recognized, as I'm sure many presenters up here do, there's so many side tracks you can take for study and stuff. It's never ending. I kind of got sidetracked. I got this kind of assignment 3 weeks ago. And I find myself in the last half of the last week preparing what I wanted to share with you today because I kept going, oh, that's interesting. And I went off and started looking at that. And my wife says, no, get back focused, So as we go through this, you'll recognize there's a lot of opportunities for future studies. Looking more through... also in 2, at the time, the mountain of the house of the Lord will become the highest of all the mountains on earth. And of course, that's metaphorically. It doesn't mean that the mountain's going to grow or anything like that, but it's importance that it becomes. And all nations will look towards this as the source of their faith and belief. It'll all come about through this region. Isaiah 2:3, the people of all nations of the earth will finally understand that God of Israel is right. It's an interesting statement. It says the people of the earth will understand. Not necessarily all people, but the people of the earth will understand. They'll at least be exposed to it. They'll see it. So that's kind of an interesting concept for us. He is the one true God, and the Gentiles of the earth will flock to Jerusalem to learn from the Lord. His teaching will reach the world from Jerusalem. Again, probably metaphorically spoken. Not necessarily everybody's going to crowd around Jerusalem, but with our technology today, it's very easy to reach Jerusalem. We see people such as yourselves that have actually gone there and shared information to us here, and we can relate and connect with what's happened over there, although we've never been there, some of us. I wanted to read, just to show you in those first 3 to 4 verses, Micah 4, 1 through 3, if I can indulge you for just a minute. In the last days, Micah, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. Pretty similar language that we've already heard. It will be exalted above the hills, and peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples and will settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." So a lot of the intent or emphasis of what Isaiah is sharing is also shared in Micah. Very, very similar. Okay. Uh-oh.
Point it down this way. Here you go.
Okay. Right?
Wait a minute. I think I might have got a disconnect here. Let me see what's going on.
Okay, we're going to be looking at verses 4 through 5. It's, during the time, the future reign of Christ on earth as the Messiah, this we're speaking about here, the Lord will finally bring order to the world. Well, we definitely know that's not happened yet. Okay. Was I pushing it?
Right back.
Yeah, go back. Yeah,
There we go.
one more, I think.
Yeah, I think we're on 2:4 right now. Yeah. And he also says, all will be right with the earth, with the Lord settling disputes between all nations and removing any need for countries to prepare for war. So this is kind of the era like this. I don't know how long this is. No one really knows or anything. I hope this is very short. I wish I could have made it just a real short line continuum. It's been a reasonable amount of years before this. The age of grace, I'm not sure how long that's going to be, but I'm glad that I was in it to be able to participate in understanding what God's plan was and be able to accept it before this time. Certainly before tribulations. But this millennium, if he's ruling, I don't know if that's heaven on earth or what that is, but it's got to be better than what it is now.
Amen.
Looking at 2:5, Isaiah urges the Israelites of his day not to wait for that day to start walking in the light of the Lord, but do it now, he says, and tells them, even though he knows they will not listen. That's a frequent conversation that we have today. When we have the call to baptism, there's kind of a sense of urgency there. It's almost a pleading cry to, wake up, smell the coffee, come on in, be a part of, what is really necessary for your salvation. And he's wanting this for the people. Don't wait for this glorious time of Christ's reign and his second coming. Don't wait for that. Let's do it now. Even though he knows we will not do it. And that's kind of the sad commentary of our generation and several generations before us and probably several after us, is that they're not taking the initiative to really address the most important thing in our lives, and that's our own salvation. But because they choose not to do it, that's why the Lord has abandoned. And that's kind of the word for this scenario. His own people to this moment. This is not a permanent casting aside of the nation of Israel. What Isaiah describes is for the end times will still occur. The good opportunity will still occur. God is willing to stand by and let one people suffer the consequences of their own choices. And I mean, as parents, we know kids are going to make bad choices, and we oftentimes will intercede their poor decision because we love them. And our responsibility as a parent is to protect them and care for them. And so we intercede. But I learned pretty early that there's a lot of learning that does come from some mistakes. And I learned to caution myself to allow those things that happen. And invariably, when you do, the comment is they look up at you with those doe eyes and say, "Why did you let me do that?" And had you told them not to, they'd have looked at you with a scowl like, "Leave me alone." But God is kind of letting us run our own course here, and to our own demise, we're making a lot of poor choices. And I say we, I'm talking in the general terms, because remember, a lot of this punishment and everything like this is nationwide, perhaps globally. I remember when I was a football coach, some kid, well, when I was a football player, when some kids would do something wrong, we all had to run a lap. And I could tell you, every time I had to run a lap because somebody did something wrong, I was mad at that guy. And when we were in the locker room, there's no question, he knew I was mad at him. Okay? Because I didn't want to have to run laps for somebody else misbehaving. Now, my father was a football coach, so I knew how to behave on the field. And I didn't tolerate that sort of thing. And as I got older and I became a coach, I think just like your father, I started doing the same thing, and then I realized, why am I pushing those guys when that guy is the knucklehead that it's not doing right? Then I kind of monitored my behavior about that. And it always, when I'm reading this, and maybe you have a struggle, or maybe it's just mine alone, I struggle with the idea that there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of things wrong. The proof to me is that not everybody is doing something wrong, but everyone is going to be punished. Because Isaiah was a good man. At least from my understanding, he was a just man. I may not be perfectly right in that, but so that's kind of a difficult thing for me to reconcile. I believe it, and I'm sure it's the right way it was done because I have faith, but those are some of the yin and yang things that I struggle with as I read through this. I don't know if that happens to you. You probably got it real clear in your head. Okay, looking at 2:6. As you read that, I'm going to share with you. In Isaiah's times, God's people were full of beliefs and superstitions. I'm going to kind of paraphrase in this. There was divination going on. There was all sorts of sorcery and all sorts of things that were taking place. They were looking at idols and praying to them. And now these people, it sounds like they're quite a ways away from God. Would you agree? Yep. But they were successful. I mean, these people had horses and donkeys. For an old farmer, that's important stuff. They had gold, they had silver, they had all sorts of wealth. They had large families. They had a lot of things that come to people, even though they were not following God. Now, not following God isn't saying you're going to suffer, but ultimately, it doesn't pay out. Paul,
This is important to understand why it says the descendants of Jacob and not like Abraham or anything. If you don't get this, you're not going to be on the understanding of this stream. Right. It's not Abraham because all these people came from Abraham's It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob becomes Israel. And in other words, then the 12 tribes come, Joseph and all the brothers
Yeah.
and nephews and everything become the 12 tribes, of the Jewish nation and everything. So if you don't understand that, you can't
Yeah.
just say Abraham. And a lot of people, it just goes over their head.
Yeah. And a lot of it does for me too, Paul, but I appreciate that input. Also, I want to share with the idea that even though these people are rich and doing quite well, but not following God, if we look at Mark 8:36, let me share this with you. It says, "What good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul?" You can party all night long, but you got to come back home to mom and dad. And it's a big pardon.
You got to play football the next day.
Yeah, you got to play ball the next day. So a lot of people are being fooled by the things that are leading them in the wrong direction because it feels good, which is a commentary that's used so often today. Is, hey, it can't be wrong if it feels good. That should be right up there with it. It's so good, it's too good to be true. That's the sort of thing people need to stop and pause for a moment and think about the short term versus the long term. And I don't think you could do that unless you have an established faith and always growing in that faith. Okay, looking at 2:8, as you've read through that, they also made deals with foreigners. The Israelites were extremely wealthy, as we said, with gold and treasures. Do they believe the false gods they serve have provided this wealth to them? Questionable idea. The number of idols in Judah suggests that exactly what they believe. So they actually believe that their success, and it's all handmade. The idols don't appear. They're handmade by men. These people are making their own gods, and we're still doing that today. You see it a lot in entertainment. You see it a lot in wealth gathering. You see it a lot in property gathering. All sorts of things is that we're making our own gods. We're serving really what we desire. And that's what happened a lot here. And they're thinking the results of their success is actually coming from that. And if they feel that way, it creates a chasm between them and their real spiritual source. And it grows as their prosperity and things grow. But remember, eternity is much longer than their own personal wealth. All the idols, all the things that they've gained, family, all that stuff, in time will turn to dust. Everything will turn to dust. You got to look at the long game, and see really why God has this message in store for us. Looking at 2:9, the state of Israel in his generation, Isaiah says, is a shocking thing to the Lord. He says, did I turn off? How'd that happen? He said, do not forgive them. I'll keep talking. If you can't hear me, I'll talk a little louder.
This will catch it on there.
Okay. He says a tremendous thing.
Talking about kids. Keep going.
All right. So he says an amazing thing. Yeah. All right. Do not forgive them. When I read that, it reminded me of True Grit. Have you ever seen that movie? Oh, John Wayne. Oh, I love John Wayne. His acting name on that show was Rooster Cogburn. And he was kind of a roaming sheriff of a type. And he was in this very, very large meadow, sitting on a horse by himself with his patch over his eye. And he was looking across the meadow at the 6 men, I believe it was 6, I'm not quite sure. And he was telling them, Ned, I'm here to arrest you. And Ned he says, you think you're going to take me in? He says, yeah, you're going to either sit on your horse or laying across it.
Keep talking.
This is a dramatic scene, so I got to be careful. So, is it on yet? Okay. So, the criminal across the meadow says to him, "That's a mighty bold talk for a one-eyed fat man." So he puts the reins in his teeth and he cocks both riders and he says, whatever he says, yeah, bring it on. Yeah, and then he rides across, and of course, he's the one that rides back. But that's kind of what I was thinking about when I heard Isaiah, or read Isaiah. It says, "Do not forgive them." That's pretty bold talk, because that's his people. This is his people. This is fine. Like, if you were all doing some bad things, I'd say, "Butch, hey, kick him out of the class." I mean, we've had enough of these people. That's pretty hard, because you're all my people. But that's what makes me believe this was a real righteous man. And God's condemnation, basically, on the human race at this time was, "I'm going to abandon you for a while." And ultimately, they split Isaiah in half. He suffers for it. He clapped 3 times. I mean, he went down, and I'm metaphorically speaking, with the claps. You know, he knew God was with him all the time. So we can be without God and be enriched. We can be with God and go through a lot of agony. It's your true grit that determines which course you're going to take. And I'd like to say that I tell them to fill their hands, because I'm coming. But I don't always do it. I fail a lot. And that's what gives me second thoughts about, I'm not studying this deep enough. I'm not engaged in it enough. I don't interact enough. I don't have the conversation enough to really get the depth that I could have the conviction to clap 3 times under tremendous stress. When you hear the story, you'd like to think, man, that guy was awesome. I can be like that. I don't fool myself. I've been through some difficult things, but I don't know if I can get through that. I'm real honest with you. I don't know. That's pretty tough, and it humbles me tremendously. And so I'm not standing before you as if I got all the answers or I can overcome all these things. But I hope this inspires you to think about your own internal vision of how you would respond or what you need to do to move forward. Looking at 2:11, the result will be in the end to human arrogance in Israel. They will be completely humbled and defeated. The Lord, however, will be exalted. The splendor of his glory will be obvious to all who have failed to see it. The Lord's cause and purpose will be victorious, even as his own people are defeated in judgment. It's kind of poetically spoken, better than I can orate in front of you, because regardless of what actions we take or what we do, the glory is going to be God's. He's going to win in the end. And it just depends on what team we want to be on. And our team or his team. And our team may enrich you for a time, but in the long run, we can lose our souls. Okay, looking at 2:12, give you an opportunity to kind of read through it. Isaiah calls God the Lord of hosts, a name which points to his power. The Lord promises a reckoning against everything proud and self-exalted and rebellious against him. The arrogant may tell themselves that they have won and will never be brought down. Yet this is not true. The day of the Lord reaches them in the end. We cannot escape it. We cannot avoid it. We do avoid a lot. Would you agree? Today, we avoid a lot of what he's calling us because it's not convenient. It creates greater stress in us, makes us tired. But there's a lot of things that we're kind of shying away from, and we need to pay closer attention and exert greater effort to follow His will. That's one thing my wife always told me in our 41 years of marriage. Everybody has difficult times. Yeah, it's constantly over 41 years. But everyone has time in marriage where you have ups and downs, right? Difficult times, whether, it's me causing difficulty in our family because she never does. Or you can laugh at some of these. They're really, I'll get in trouble for it when I get home. But, or the kids cause difficulty, or your in-laws cause difficulty, or your own parents cause it. But, all these things happen. And I would say, Noel, why? We do this. I know our faith is strong. Why is it this is happening? She says, our faith is strong, but are you in His will? Are you walking in His will? Now, when I committed myself as a Christian, when I was baptized, I made a commitment that none of you or anyone else can break me up. I had a very close family member ask me, says, why do you have so much, and this was an ordained person. Why do you have so much faith? Why, there's no doubt in your mind that salvation and Jesus exists and that there's one way to heaven, and I says, because I chose it. And when I made a choice to marry that girl or to accept Christ, that's a bond that will not break. And to me, if I had any unique features, that's one I have, because I find people that struggle with that, and I'm dumbfounded. We've got to take a stand someplace in life. And that's me preaching to you, and I don't mean to do that. I feel so strong inside right now, I got to get it out or I'm faint or something. But we've got to take a position. And sometimes that strong position I just described to you, I asked my wife, to me, the most genteel person I know, she's a PK, right? Born in Africa, taught in Korea, mission field, did all this stuff. Her dad was a minister and I was on the gun range. So we're kind of two different people. But I turn to her and I go, why is this happening? She just says, you've got to get back in His will. Follow Him. These are messages I'm sharing with you because as I've read through this, I'm sure some of it hit you, but part of this class, those tenets that Butch shared with us, is part of us how we're going to internalize these things and how we're going to live with them. So you get this one guy's version out of, everybody has their own version, and I'd like to take time to hear them all, but you know how Butch is. I'm just teasing you, brother. Okay, now I'm kind of looking at 13 through 18. Isaiah is identifying things on earth which human beings might put in their trust in instead of the Lord. Faith and wealth. This is, remember where I told you it kind of gets a little repetitious? Resources or power is foolish. This is to drive home the case that the Lord will bring everything crumbling down in His time. The passage has mentioned great trees and now tops that are describing great mountains and hills. All these idols will disappear. I kind of shared that with you earlier. Again, like I said, it's repetition. That all these things that we may value, the earthly things, first of all, everything we're talking about, the gold, the trees, the mountains and stuff, we're like, oh, wow, like this. God's over here, and we're going, oh, wow, like this. He created all those things. We're not looking this way. We're looking out this way. And how is it that we become so self-absorbed that the things that He created, we take and mold into statues or paint mountain scenes on pictures and things, and value that more than what we did here. Think of all the landscapes that were painted. I'm just spitballing here. Trillions of dollars worth of art worldwide. put that in towards the salvation of humanity through the church. We're valuing the wrong things and putting our emphasis in the wrong direction. I think before we look back to God, we need to look inside and see, are we preparing ourselves to present ourselves one day to you? When our head bows and our knee bends, are we preparing ourselves for that moment where Christ can stand before us and say, I knew this man, I knew this woman. They are with me. I hope I don't have to say anything. Hope's the wrong word. I am faithfully directed to the notion that he'll stand before me and I won't have to say a word. Isaiah's wanting that for his own people, even though he knows they will not do it. God's judgment will find them. He'll find all of us. These metaphors about being in the cave, I always thought of Plato's Republic, right? About the allegory of the cave and all this other stuff. As human beings, when I came home and I messed up, I broke a window in the house. And I knew when my dad was coming home, I'm going to get in trouble. And I was just dreading it, and I thought, well, if he comes home, he better find me mowing the lawn, or feeding the cows, or chopping wood. He better find me engaged in something that he would really appreciate. Didn't help. But I did, that's my hiding in the cave. I'm hiding in the cave because of the retribution that I felt like I was going to get. Because my mistake, it's not important, but I broke the window and I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing. It was just simply wrong. And you don't get punished for accidents, but when you know better, you're in trouble. Anyways, that's the sort of thing that spoke to me quite a bit here, is that people hid from what they knew was a true source of all things. They weren't turned this way, they were turned that way, but when they got about right here, and in their peripheral vision, they're seeing, and they went to caves, they went to hide their wealth, they went to do all these things to take away their shame from the presence of God. And that's going to happen. Our arrogance is what's keeping us from doing it now. Gosh, that bad? Okay. No. She says, if it's bad, I'm walking out. No, she didn't. She didn't say it. Yeah. And then in Isaiah 20, those whom God judges will finally accept that he alone is the source of true power. That's happening somewhere early in here. So the millennium can really take place. Is that finally we're going to turn and we're going to recognize, okay, this is where it all comes from. Why we can't do that now, to me, that's a $1 million question. I think we get in front of ourselves. There's so many obstacles that are so inane that it's hard for me to even interject myself into those conversations. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm sure I will. My wife, I'm really good at that. Not on purpose. But, I had those same relatives said to me, says, well, don't you believe that these animals will go to heaven? And my response is, I haven't read it, and I really don't care. That's not important to my salvation. I just shared this with them. I know that God made us during creation, to take part in taking care of this planet and everything that he made. He asked us, or invited us, to be partners in this. And then when we failed him, he gave us an opening, a very small opening for us to crawl through, by giving us Christ on the cross for our salvation. That's the connection between us and God is that through Christ we have salvation for our souls. And to interact with Him. I don't think that He created this situation to have interaction with trees or goats or animals of such nature. These are important things. These are His creations. I'm not minimizing that. But I'm sitting there saying we have a unique, special association with our Savior. And why we're not able to look at that holistically today, worldwide, is time for another study. Let me see where we are here. Okay, good. Okay, looking at Isaiah 2:21, human arrogance will be brought low despite all the apparent success in the moment. After that, they're going to recognize who God is. The crucial overall message of this passage is the need to trust God, not human beings. His power is genuine and eternal. Okay, now before you do anything, if you could listen to me, I think I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables. There's 3 of those things. It's all the same questions on the papers. There's 4 questions on each paper. I'm sorry it wasn't a full sheet. I cut through it. It looks dorky. But what I would like your table to do is look at those questions, and Paul, just focus on your table, and this is an example for those 5 tables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rand, you're sitting close to your wife, so you're part of that table.
I'm part of that table.
So, Paul, what I want you to do is I want you guys to agree on one question that you'd like to respond to. Come up with one person that will make the response. Do not talk to the other tables. I want each table to do that. I'm giving you 90 seconds to come up with an agreed question. Go!
Or be sawn in half. No.
Shorter, yeah.
How does Isaiah's call to walk in light and all the and be in the present?
You got 30 seconds to pick the question, then you start discussing the question among yourselves. Okay, now you have 90 seconds to discuss how you're going to present what you arrived at on that question and the presenter. What you going to say? You have 30 seconds to select a presenter. the question. Oh, here you go. May I borrow that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right,
Two streets.
ready position.
Ready.
I'm gonna call this table 1,
All right.
table B, orange, rutabaga, bicycle.
Where's the hour, brother?
The reason why is everybody wants to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E. You guys got to get out of your rut. Man, we're going to be unique around here. Be unique. All right, table 1. Tell me before you present, what question, 1, 2, 3, or 4 did you pick?
We picked question 3.
How many else picked question 3? Excellent, excellent. Sir, you picked question 3?
We did.
Okay, 3 did I say how many picked question 3? There we go. Okay, we got 3. All right. What questions did you all pick? 4? And excellent. See, I want to see, now I look at the questions and how we gravitated to those questions. The question 3, how can Isaiah rebuke against pride and ignorance? It was 3 and 4, right? And how can we practically apply the lesson of reverence to God instead of human strength in our life? I think those are great. And what I just wanted to say is, that's a pretty cohesive class. You know, great minds think alike. The one without hair thinks better. Amen. All right, so let's go with table 1 and kind of read your question and share your thoughts, and then we'll go to table bicycle, and then table orange.
We all had our church. How can Isaiah's rebuke against pride and arrogance be a lesson for us today in our personal and professional life? I immediately thought of the scripture that says, pride goeth before the fall. And that the Lord, we have to realize that the Lord is ultimately in charge and He is almighty. God focus versus self-focus is what I was fed by one of our board members. All right, Amy. I thought my wife told me to say it. But to be God focused. And here's just a quick analogy. I've been a business owner for 40 plus years, and you have to strive, you have to work, you have to show diligence and pride in your work. It's nothing compared to God.
Yeah.
He is so much, so my pride is nothing. Okay? And it can't be. That's it.
Okay, so bicycle. How can we, this is number 4?
No, 3.
3, I'm not following that. We got to read your question and share whatever else you have to add to that.
Okay. Well, we said kind of holistically, we're blessed as a nation and as individuals. And that so many people are far from God, so we need to take an inventory of our own lives often.
Inventory.
You know, we shouldn't just assume because we're following God or you have to take an inventory. And I thought John came up with a really good analogy. He said it's like a compass. You need to really refer to the compass often and make sure you're on the right path and track and that you're not veering off just a little bit, because you just get off a little bit and you're off the mark. So I thought that was really good. And then I just wanted to add, I think, repent. I just think that's the one thing as Christians personally, you know, and even professionally, we need to repent for what we're doing.
We're getting down to about 4 minutes. Great input on what we took out of this and can use going forward. Orange?
It's very, very similar, a lot of what you said, Trish. I think, you know, recognizing that that was the original sin. Pride and arrogance was the original sin. And it's very easy for that to rise up in us. I mean, we're old. We've lived a long time. People can tell, young people will say things to us that we know are not true, And our pride just goes, who are you trying to tell that? You know what I mean? So it is, we do have to keep a check on ourselves. Because as Beth said, this is all about Jesus. This is all about our Father in heaven. None of it's about us.
Well, I think a good way to address that pride and arrogance is to teach up here because it humbles you pretty quick. All right, at least me, you know, I'm watching Danny and Carol up here speaking, and I looked at Noah, and I go, why did I do this? But, okay, table B, would you read, I guess you're number 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says, how can we practically apply the lessons of reliance on God instead of human strength in our lives? And collectively, we spoke about belief and trust in God and going to Him first instead of reacting in fear or relying on another person to squelch our fears.
And one,
Excellent.
and one thing, it is a decision. As you said, you made a decision. So from Habakkuk, he says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vine, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. It's a decision to focus on Him.
It's a decision. Thank you, Carol. Awesome. That's great input there. That tells you actually how to apply it. That's really good. Let's see here. 1B, orange. Rutabaga. That's right. You were the vegetable. Okay. Read the question once, please. and then go.
How can we practically apply the lessons of reliance on God instead of human strength in our life? Number 1, take responsibility. Stop making excuses. Excuses are only good for the people that make them. And we absolutely have none.
Very good.
And that is based out of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not upon your own understanding or anyone else's. That's just to paraphrase that one. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path.
Acknowledge it. That's the important part. Well, I'm grateful. Wonderful class. Great insights, great input, and I appreciate you being here.